Gold Goods and Guns podcast for July 8th, 2026. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. It's episode 251, and I have the great pleasure of bringing back Raconteur, owner of Goldfix, and now author of the new book, As Good as Gold, The Return of Real Money, my good friend and good and dear friend, Vince Lanci. Vince, how are you?
I'm good, Tom. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for having me back. We have a lot to talk about as usual, and
Uh,
I want to get to that.
Absolutely, man. We do have a lot to talk about, and the first thing I think we should talk about was you've done something that I have been yelled at by many people for a long time to do, and I haven't done, which is write a book. And so I'm both a little jealous and a little edified and a
Right.
little embarrassed and a little of all of those things, and also, of course, proud of you for having pulled that off. So, dude, let's talk
Thank
about that.
you. The secret to writing a book, Tom, is just don't make it too long. Mine is very short. You can read it in 3 hours. It's
Right,
it's like
right, right.
it's more like a pamphlet than anything else.
I know
What's
it's funny. I was talking with Joe Malazzi, the showrunner from Stargate and Dark Matter and a couple of other things
right?
on Twitter the other day, and actually this subject came up, and he said something along the lines of, I've got like old scripts that are half finished, and he's like, and every time I sit down to write a new script, he's like, that first act, those first couple of scenes, he's like, he obsesses about how hard he hates the dialogue and he hates this, and then eventually he gets the opening, and then the rest of the thing just falls into place. But it's that opening moment that just scares the hell out of him. And I said, Joe, that's a really fascinating story, because now you know exactly why the very idea of writing a book just like turns me into a pile of jelly. He's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that same way. I'm like, no way could I ever write a novel. I'm like, I've got novels half written from the before time that I've gone back and reread and gone, actually, these aren't half bad. Maybe you should develop these. And I'm like, yeah, but it's, it's a different me that. So I just find that whole process fascinating. I can throw out short bon mots. I can throw out, articles and whatnot. And sometimes I feel even they're difficult. Like sometimes writing the newsletter, just trying to put a 3,500 word lead article together for the newsletter, sometimes just like devastates me for
No,
days.
your writing is prolific. I mean, you put together the weekly market report every week, and then you have these long newsletters. I mean, you've been writing books for a long time. You just don't call it that.
I know that's kind of the thing. And when we were getting, and I will say this as well, is that, for years, when I was doing the actively blogging and doing the newsletters, and I still write two of them, I was writing upwards of 100,000 words a month. And,
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
that's like writing, that's like Philip K. Dick level of output, where the guy was putting out a book every 6 months, like for
Yeah,
6 years.
my book is only like 32,000 words.
Right. I know.
So I mean, there you go. There you
Oh, well,
go.
that's great. That's 32,000 words. This is a good afternoon. You sit down, you read it, you get a drink or a cup of coffee, you put
That's right. That's
lounge
right.
back in the Barca lounger and do the thing. So with all that said, Vince, what's the book about?
The short version is that most people think the global financial system runs on money, milkshake theory, and all that. But my argument is that it actually runs on collateral. And the collateral that we use nowadays is US Treasuries. They have been the dominant form of that collateral. The a little bit longer version goes like this. The book traces how we got here. We went from a world where gold was the ultimate settlement asset to a world where treasury bonds became the backbone of global finance. I walk readers through the evolution of that system and
Mm,
explain concepts like repo markets, dollar recycling, and rehypothecation in a way that non-specialists can understand. The second half of the book asks a bigger question: what happens when confidence in that collateral begins to change, like the Russian reserve confiscation in 2022, and
mm.
how we started to move towards gold from then. And that's what the book is about.
Cool. That's this is funny. Like you say, and listening to you, I'm like, this is even for a guy like me, right, who thinks he understands some of this stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I I do believe I think I understand some of it.
Right.
The truth of the matter is that it never hurts to have. It's really good, I think, actually, to have somebody who goes over the primitives, because most people don't understand plumbing. They don't understand how the world actually moves money around the world, how this stuff gets done, and we focus on gross things like money supply or even money demand or this all these other things, and we forget that the most important thing is, if you don't have good pristine collateral, then there's no trust in the system. And if there's
Right.
no trust in the system, then the whole system has to either change or collapse, one or the other. So,
Right.
is that part of the argument you make in the book, or
That is. I mean, that's. I mean, you open by saying you open by commenting that if the book was right for you or someone like you, and I guess that actually brings up the question like who is the book for? And it's written
Mm,
for people who know something, people who know less than you. It's written for people who know something important is changing, in the monetary system, but
right,
can't quite explain what. You don't need a finance degree. I explain repo markets, reserve assets, and collateral chains in plain English. The goal is to help readers understand the plumbing that sits behind the headlines that you were referring to. So,
right,
um, yeah, it's basically money is money. You can use anything for money. And I'm not saying it's not important that the dollar is the global currency, but the collateral behind the money is what gives people faith in the money.
right, right. So like, let's give an example on that. Like, if you we can let's put a little bit of color on that, I guess is the best way to talk about it. Like, so we understand that U.S. Treasuries are the main collateral that's in the system, but at the end of the day, all of that is built on so many other things underneath that, like the
The
hard
trust.
assets that, well, it's not just the trust. I would also argue, and I think you're probably, I know you're going to make this argument. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the only reason we ask for, care about, or wonder about money is that so we can get our hands on the goods and services, the goods that we need in order to build the things that we want to build. Like, the whole, what's the point? This is where my Austrian, training comes in, and I say, okay, so why do we act? Why do we do what we do? Why do we engage in commerce? It's to alleviate a future anxiety, right? In
Right.
order to
Future need.
like a future need and but to alleviate a future an anxiety about the future. Like,
Right.
why do I build a house so that I don't have to worry about the next rainstorm, right? Why do I do any of these things? And we, at a certain point, sometimes we get lost in the big stuff and we forget to talk about the kind of the primitives of what all of this is built on. And the primitives, I think, and I mean primitives in a logical, construct or way.
Right.
I don't mean in terms of we're primitive people. I mean, in terms of
No,
like
no, no, no. I
like
get
the
it. I get
building
it.
blocks of how this works. So,
The
go through
basics, the basics,
one,
the
yeah,
basics. Right.
one of these things. Go through some of that, and then give an example. Even give an example that you use in the book. I mean, I'd be okay with that.
Well, whenever a bank lends to another bank, because banks lend to each other, that's what they do.
Hmm.
When governments trade, when derivatives are cleared, when central banks hold reserves, they're all relying on assets that the system trusts.
Right.
For the last several decades, U.S. Treasury securities have been the dominant form of that collateral.
Hmm.
Now, after the events like the freezing of the Russian reserves in 2022, a lot of countries started asking whether reserve assets, the ones that you're
Hmm.
talking about, are as politically neutral as they once believed. At the same time, central banks around the world had been buying gold at the fastest pace in decades. So the book explores whether we're moving toward a new monetary architecture, which is really an old monetary architecture,
Hmm.
or one where treasuries remain important. Treasuries are the quintessential example of that. Since we went off the gold standard in 1971, it's been all about treasuries. But other than treasuries, it's trust in the people that are operating the treasuries. It's the military around the world. It's all the things that make the dollar trustworthy, and those things are still in place. It's just a lack of neutrality in treasuries now that I think has people spooked. I mean, look, there's really only one takeaway that I would want readers to remember, that money gets all the attention, but collateral does all the work. Hope I
Yeah.
answered your question.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually. And it's funny, like I used to focus on money and all the time, and I remember sitting down and chatting with Alex Craner one day, and he kept bringing up this word collateral. Collateral. Like, I'm trying to catch up to what Alex is talking about because I wasn't in that frame of mind at all.
Right,
And
right,
the minute he started talking about oil trade as the collateral of how the world
right.
operates,
Oil is collateral.
I went, oh yeah, you're right, Alex. But I'm like sitting there having to like organize it in my head. And I, of course, don't have a good frame of reference. I don't have the primitives. So I'm trying to like work from the top back down to the
Right,
bottom as
right.
opposed from the bottom up.
Well, I mean, oil is the better. Oil would be better money than gold if it didn't, decompose or it wasn't so used so much.
Right. Well, I mean, that's basic, Mises regression theorem stuff that, a commodity becomes money because it's demand as money overwhelms all of its other demand
Right.
functions, right?
Right.
And so,
Exactly.
gold can operate as a circuit board trace, but why? It's better as money. We can use copper or silver or something else, which is
Right.
nearly as good as gold
It's
for the
useless.
purposes that we need. And then
Right.
therefore we can have gold be the thing that it does really well. It's got all these properties and makes it good money. And
Which is
um,
why oil is interesting, because oil can't be money per se, but
no,
it can be, the most important collateral behind the money.
right.
And things like, what's going on in the Middle East make that clear. That's one of the
Hmm.
reasons that the US dollar is stronger. People are talking about the SPR being drained, like we're getting rid of our collateral, which is our hedge for future problems, but we're not doing that. That's all partly a bunch of bullshit. Uh,
Okay, that's it's not that I disagree with that a controversial statement like that because I do agree with it, but like, why is it bullshit? I'm gonna tee you up right here with the softball question.
right,
Why
right,
is it
right.
bullshit,
The
Vince?
the the okay. You have to know a little about oil plumbing, and I do.
Yep.
I mean, I've been taught by people who know more than me. Brent Kelly being one of them. But in the SPR, there's two types of withdrawals. This is not too wonky, but I want to make it clear. There's sales, which are just sales, and
Hmm.
there's loans. Now, Biden did sales. Biden just went in my opinion, irresponsibly just sold. He
Right.
sold whatever he sold in 2022. Now, what Trump is doing what's the more responsible, the more common version, which is a loan. Now, they don't call it a loan; they call it a uh, exchange. They call it an exchange. And
Mm.
what it really is the government goes to a company like Exxon, or Exxon goes to a government and says, I need some oil. Can I get some oil? And the SPR gets released to them. So the government says to Exxon or Vitol or Tosco or BP USA or whoever, they say, okay, I've got 2 million barrels for you. Do you want them? Yes. All right. What's the spot price? Spot price is $110, let's say. And Exxon says, fine, I'll take it at $110. Now, what Exxon does with that right away is they don't hedge it. They have that oil that they're going to use because they've already contracted to sell diesel, to sell mid-level distillates, to sell jet fuel, to sell gasoline, RBOB, what have you. And so they do that. And what that does is it stops Exxon from having to go into the spot market and drive it higher by buying at such a high price. And it makes the market more level. What people think that oil's gone for good. It's not. What the government does with Exxon in an exchange program or a loan repayment program is Exxon signs a contract. I mean, I haven't seen the actual contract, but Exxon signs a contract that says they will refill this oil plus more 1 year from now. So the government says, here's 2 million ounces of crude right now. And Exxon says, I will pay you 2.5 million 1 year from now.
Oh,
And
it's a
that's
repo.
now it's
It's a repo
it's
contract in
basically a
oil.
backwardation trade. What?
It's a repo. It's a repo transaction in oil.
It's like exactly. It's a repo trade. We are doing a swap. The
Right.
U.S. government is saying we want to keep prices at stable price. The backwardation is too steep. Oil and the U.S. government, to its credit, is selling oil at $100 and buying it at 70. That's
Bingo.
basically what it's doing.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
taking advantage
yeah, no,
of the
that's
backwardation.
really funny. And you say that, and I was trying to explain that on Twitter the other day. Somebody, said something about this very thing. And I said, you do realize that Trump was buying oil at $60 a barrel before the war
Right.
and refilling the quote unquote refilling the SPR and then selling it at $100 a barrel, knowing full well that he's going to buy it back at 65. Now, I wasn't thinking in terms of this forward sale
But
repo
that's what he
contract.
was doing. That's exactly
Exactly
that's
what he was
exactly what he was doing. It happened. It's a contract. I mean, just to put a fine point. First of all, let me just say this: if you don't believe me, you want to look up, or you don't, or you'd like to learn more, look up a Department of Energy statement that was put out on March 11th of this year. And the
doing. Okay.
headline is United States to release 172 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, that's a fact. That's what we
Hmm.
did. That's what we're doing. That's why we're scraping the bottom. But in the statement, there's in the note, there's a statement, and it says President Trump promised to protect America's energy security by managing the SPR responsibly, and this action demonstrates his commitment to that promise. Unlike now, of course, he's got to dig Biden. Unlike the previous administration, with left America's oil reserves drained and damaged, the United States has arranged to more than replace these strategic reserves with approximately 200 million barrels within the next year. So we're selling 172 million barrels
Yeah.
now, and we're getting $200 million in barrels a year from now. Now, granted, there's risk to us to do that, but the risk is really borne by the producer. The producer
Hmm.
has the oil. Basically, the producer says, yeah, I'll have plenty of oil a year from now. I just need it right now. And so
Right.
they take that oil that they haven't even pulled out of the ground yet and they earmark it for the government. So I'm not saying I just want to before I completely sound like I don't think there's any problem at all. There will be problems if the SPR gets low enough because we
Hmm.
have to fill it aggressively, but not the kind of problems like it's the end of the world, it's doom. In fact, if it is the end of the world and it is doom, it'll be felt by everyone else before us. Because
Yeah.
what Trump's probably going to do next is if it becomes a problem, he'll restrict the sale of distillates and finished products by American companies overseas.
Yeah.
That's what he'll probably do. So
Yeah.
he's going to give the oil to Exxon, and Exxon's going to make gasoline for us. And I think that's what's going to come next. So,
Yeah, no, and that makes sense, especially when you look at the gasoline futures forward curve.
right.
Um, I just thinking off the top of my head now, as you were saying that, I've been championing this left and right recently. Yeah, you can look at the forward curve on Brent crude, you can look at the forward curve on WTI, but go look at the forward curve on gasoline and what you called earlier, what you called RBOB, which is
Right.
reblended
Right.
oxygen RBOB
Yeah.
gasoline futures. Um, by by November, I think the contract's down to 230 a gallon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trading at three, it's trading at $3 today. It's gonna be trading at 230
Well,
a gallon.
that's the beauty of seasonality.
Mhm.
Gasoline is a summer driving asset, and in
Mhm.
wintertime, you can get. We need gasoline now, and I'll pay you back with gasoline later. Well,
Mhm.
gasoline later is cheaper, and so that happens.
Right,
So that's why we're not giving away heating oil. I mean, we're
right,
not giving away gasoline as well, but we're giving away oil that's being converted into gasoline. We have plenty of heating oil.
right. Now the other and another thing I noted this morning, somebody posted up on Twitter this morning. I saw, which is that American exports of middle distillates have reached an all-time high. Like I think we
Yeah,
sold like 8.7 million barrels a day.
yeah.
In the last week or 2 weeks. I'm like, we're making money hand over fist on this.
Right. The
And
companies are. The companies are. I want to push back on.
sure.
I want to be anti-Trump here for a moment and just say, yeah, he's giving oil to Exxon, and Exxon is selling that oil as gasoline or whatever as diesel overseas, and that's the profit motive. That's the reason they do it. And
Right.
eventually, it's profit for the companies. It's profit for the U.S. But yeah, we
Mhm.
have higher prices in oil, higher prices in gasoline, and gasoline's a little bit high right now, but when he senses that Americans start complaining about it too much, he's going to restrict the sale of distillates overseas. So
Yeah,
I agree with
that
I
makes perfect sense.
agree.
And then what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, for example, and we're working at it today. We're doing this on the 8th, which is the day after the latest round of strikes on Iran and the breakdown of the
Right.
MOU and all this stuff, which is also a weekend, 2 weeks after the big earthquake in Venezuela. I was arguing with somebody the other day about this, and I said, I would argue that the earthquake in Caracas had more of an effect on holding diesel prices higher in the United States than they should be, because again, yeah, if you're making the argument, for example, and this is where a lot of there's a new layer of FUD that's out there in the oil market, which is that, well, America doesn't really produce all that much crude. They produce a lot of natural gas liquids and this and that and everything else, and there's not enough C8 through C15, which is carbon 8 octane through C15 aim,
Right.
all the which is what you use
Mhm.
to make diesel fuel, right? But
Right.
gasoline is mostly C3 through C6, so propane, or
Right.
C3 through
So
C9.
let me ask you a
Like,
question. The
sure.
smaller number means lighter, right?
Yeah. So C3 is propane, right?
Right. Which
Right.
is,
So
gas.
so okay. So ethane, right? It's C2, methane is C1, propane, butane is C4, pentane C5, hexane
Right.
C6, heptane C7, octane C8, and after that, it's just the Roman. Just put the Roman thing in front of it. So
Right.
nonane, decane, dodecane, the C12, blah blah blah. So when you look at like diesel fuel, for you look at gasoline, for example, it's a mix. I mean, you can go and look up the ASTM standards on all these fuels, right? Number
Right.
one fuel is gasoline. Number two A, which is on-road diesel. Number two B, which is off-road diesel. Number four, number five, number six. They have um, a a distribution of the various anes. C3 through C9 is gasoline. It peaks around C7. The octane rating is telling you is a gross figure of what it would be equivalent of in octane in terms of energy in the gasoline.
Okay.
So lower octane has more C3 and C4 and C5 in it, whereas higher octane has more C6, C7, C8, and C9 in it. Right now we move into number two fuel, number two A fuel. It starts at like C6 and moves out to C10 or C12, C12, and that's in the curve and the distribution of the makeup of the fuel is different, and it peaks around C10 or C11, and then on off-road diesel for tractors and earth movers and stuff like that. 2B fuel is a little higher even than what you would put in your diesel truck if we were allowed to own any of them anymore. Um, and then there's number four fuel, which is basically heating oil. Number five fuel, which is basically light ship fuel, and number six is just bunker fuel, which is
Right.
what we used to move, which is basically just cleaned up crude oil
Right.
for all intents and purposes. Take the water, take the sludge out of it, and stick it in a boiler and move ships with it because it's got the higher the C number, the higher the energy rating
Right.
per
Right. Right.
barrel and per
Right.
mole reaction. If you're
Light
talking
sweet crude is not as energy efficient as, I mean, it may be more energy
as
efficient, but it's
heavy
not as
sour,
energy laden
yeah, no, as
as
heavy,
sour crude. Right,
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 on a
right,
per volume basis, on a per barrel basis, right.
right,
So Um, and that's just the nature of the chemistry. Sorry, folks, it's just the way it is. I spent a little bit of time working in the oil industry, so I learned all this stuff 25 years ago. And again, you can look up the ASTM standards on all the fuels if you're confused about what I'm talking about. But so the argument has the latest argument about all of this is that the American light sweet and ultralight sweet that we produce out of the back end and Permian and whatnot, all this fracked oil is all very high in you know, quote unquote natural gas liquids, which would be butane and propane and all that stuff. You can't make diesel fuel out of that stuff. Well, no, you can, but
right,
that's nonsensical because that's an argument. That's another bullshit argument because we have always imported our
right,
gasoline and diesel fuel for Pad One in the Northeast from the North Slope anyway,
right.
and and off the Gulf of America, all of those Chevron refineries were tuned for the heavy sour.
Right.
Really,
Chevron was tuned for, I'm just interrupting to say,
yeah.
Chevron is tuned for heavy, and Chevron is going to be also operating in Venezuela because that's where the heavy is.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what it was all designed for. Like
Right,
that created Chevron was created to pull Venezuelan oil out of
right,
and refine it on the Gulf Coast. And when we sanctioned Venezuela, the nearest this was the interesting part about it. Is when we started sanctioning Venezuela during the first Trump administration, what's the first thing we did? We went and bought a whole bunch of the heavy sour and medium sour Urals grade stuff out of Russia to fill in to keep the refineries running in
right.
on the Gulf Coast. We've lost COVID actually lost is actually we're still dealing with the downstream effects of COVID, where we lost over 2 million barrels of diesel fuel capacity, refining capacity a day in the United States. And now we're dealing with the bigger problem, which is on the left coast. They've shut all the oil refineries down, and we have a shortage of diesel fuel in JP4 on the left coast. We're actually importing it from South Korea. And
Right.
this is a real problem, folks. And this is, but people making the argument that the back end can't produce produce diesel fuel is that's irrelevant to the current problem. It
Right.
was
Right.
always it was never part of the
Diesel's
of
more important than gasoline. We always make sure we have enough diesel, even if we're not making it. It's
right.
just too important. It's not like we're not like there's no one thinking about it.
Well,
It's part of the problem.
and one of the things I wanted to this is the last thing I'll bring up, and then we'll go back to this other stuff, which is that if you look at the way we've been, this is my argument, the way we've been attacked politically and whatnot by our enemies, both foreign and domestic, it's been to destroy the diesel fuel refining capacity of the United States and
Right.
and to keep it as expensive as possible because it's part of the war on transportation. Because as
Right.
Europeans are here for the World Cup, we're finding out America's fucking big and we need cars. And that's just the way things are. And, if you can destroy the transportation networks within the United States, you know, through Fabian tactics of gradual, we'll pull this off here and we'll pull
Right.
a small thing off here.
Degrowth of cars.
Right.
Right.
And so you can see their argument, which is it's always about, hey, if we can get 100,000 barrels of diesel refining capacity off the US market, that's a win. They
Right.
don't look at we need to get all of it gone. They just like gradually, let's just keep destroying it
Right.
bit by bit by bit by bit. And that's where we are today. And so while there's a nugget of truth to that argument, it's not reality because what Trump is also doing is, of course, telling ExxonMobil, here's $10 billion, go get us more oil.
Right, right, right. It's not right, exactly. That's part of the deal.
Right.
The big companies are getting oil, they're paying it back, and they're getting invested in by the U.S. They're getting subsidized. This is all part of the centralization and authoritarian style government that we're doing now, which, for better or worse, on the libertarian side, is necessary to compete with the East, which moves in a very centralized fashion. We're both aircraft carriers now, but they
Mm-hmm.
can turn a lot faster because everyone on the ship does what they're told.
Mm-hmm.
In the West, everyone doesn't do what they're told, and so it's a lot harder to navigate. And so as a result of that,
Mm-hmm.
we have to do the things that we're doing. We partner with companies instead of with people.
Well, I mean, again, this is part of that whole This is part of the whole argument about the Hamiltonian system of political economy that my friends over at Promethean Action are arguing in favor of. What I would say is that it's actually, and this I'm going to bring right back to what your book is actually about, which is that that system is a good I think a good transitional antipode to getting off of the Keynesian debt financialization model of the old British Anglo-Dutch system, whatever you want to call
Right.
it. And that's where we are right now. And that's the tension that everybody's feeling. And since nobody has a framework with which to actually discuss any of these things intelligently, everybody's just like throwing, just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks on Twitter. And like
Right.
we need a much more focused argument for this. So I think that, this goes back to a conversation that you and I had ages ago where you said we're moving authoritarian in the United States.
Right.
And right. So I don't know where we go with from there, but I think that's part of the argument at this point going forward is we're going to watch this process play itself out, and it's going to be necessary in order to change the direction of the battleship, I guess, to extend your metaphor.
Right. 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 So I don't know. We can. I mean, we're gonna end up talking about the whole peace process and the whole withdrawal from the Middle East. You want to touch on gold first or afterwards?
I think we should probably let's talk about gold. I think
Okay.
it's really important because what's happening, because you brought up China, right? So why
Right.
don't we talk about what's actually happening over in Hong Kong with the new settlement system, which I'll be honest with you, Vince, I haven't been keeping up with. So half the reason I asked you on this podcast today was so that you could like fill me in on the shit that I haven't
Yeah,
been
but,
able
but
to focus
this is all continuation of our own conversation. We started this conversation over 2 years ago,
on.
so this is a continuation of what we talked about. Now,
Mhm.
I okay, so there's a two-track movement coming out of China. One
Okay.
is the one that we know about, and that is they want to make sure everyone owns gold and everyone's comfortable owning gold, and they want to make sure that it can be used as collateral for something. Now, what is
Hmm.
that something? The second thing is, and they need this for their whole Belt and Road Initiative to work, which it probably won't work anyway, but they
Hmm.
need the whole Belt and Road Initiative to have good collateral, but they need international renminbi. So the
Hmm.
yuan needs to be able to survive outside of China on its own. And
Hmm.
as people may or may not know, the yuan or the renminbi, same thing, um, functions in two places. It's the onshore and the offshore. Now, the onshore and the offshore never meet. There's no arbitrage. They don't let it happen. And
Right.
so the market has to regulate itself. Now, the reason I bring that up is because what China's trying to get everyone to do is China's trying to get everyone to trust the renminbi by using gold as a pseudo backing of it.
Mhm.
Okay, so they've been moving on two tracks. Let's get everyone holding renminbi and let's get everyone holding gold. So what happened this weekend and over the last 6 months that you and I have talked about is Hong Kong and Shanghai made a joint announcement and they put the two things together. And it's four bullet points. Now I have the bullet points here. If I can read the bullet points, probably most efficient. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah,
So, all
absolutely. Please
right.
go.
First bullet point is this is all from a post that I put out. Hong Kong is building the infrastructure for a global gold hub. Authorities launched a centralized gold clearing system while expanding the city's bullion trading, vaulting, settlement, and futures ecosystem. All right. Gold, second bullet, gold and the yuan are advancing together. Beijing paired those gold initiatives with major offshore RMB liquidity measures, reinforcing Hong Kong's dual role as China's precious metals and international currency gateway. Now, just before I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a second,
Sure.
we were talking about the Shanghai Gold Exchange as being the hub, and it is the hub for the
Hmm.
gold. But they tried to do the SGEI, Shanghai Gold Exchange International, to get the RMB going, but they realized they can't do it, and Hong Kong is just too important. So they're going back to Hong Kong. So the Shanghai Gold Exchange and Hong Kong pretty much opened a corridor between themselves. The gold can flow freely back and forth between them. Now, that's the gold. So China's gold is now available for Hong Kong, which means it's available for the outside world. The second part is getting the renminbi attached to it. So physical infrastructure is becoming strategic infrastructure. So that gold infrastructure, that plumbing that we talk about, delivery, they have a new product called Delivery Connect, which expands vaulting, tax incentives, and has new features, new futures products. They're going to list RMB futures,
Hmm.
Tom. And when they do that, I mean, all right, I'm
Yeah.
getting ahead of myself. They're going to start up, they're going to refurbish their dollar gold futures. So if you want to trade gold for renminbi, you can trade gold for dollars and then convert it to renminbi. But they're going to start listing gold renminbi futures.
Yes.
And that's just it's going to explode the whole thing. And so once you see that you can trade publicly your gold for renminbi, once it's fully exchangeable, then you're going to have, hopefully, to their idea, you're going to have a growing use of renminbi and more. And this all ties in with the Strait of Hormuz, with Iran trying to get people to pay in yuan. So um, um,
It's
the final
also,
point,
it's
I'm
also,
sorry.
as I was going to say, the only, I want to just to interject real quick, and we'll get to bullet point number four, which is, of course, this is what China has been trying to build for years, which is an offshore renminbi bond market.
Right.
And
It'll end with
very
bonds.
important for them. Yeah.
It'll end with bonds. In
Mhm.
fact, while people are selling US bonds, they're buying Chinese bonds now. And it's ridiculous because US bonds are yielding more than Chinese bonds. But that's it. That is ultimately the goal. Ultimately, the goal is let's be clear about something about China. They're not bullish on gold. They're bullish on Chinese bonds. They're bullish on the Chinese renminbi. They're using gold as a bridge off of the treasury market
Mhm.
towards the renminbi. That's why it was called M bridge.
Right.
They're bridging away from treasuries. They want the world to own their own renminbi. And if you own enough renminbi, eventually they're going to say, well, why don't you put it in some of our bonds? Our bonds are backed by gold. And then 6 months later, be, well, why don't you put in some of our bonds, the ones that aren't backed by gold? And
Right.
eventually you wean everyone off of it. But the interesting thing about the initiative is it extends Asia's race to dominate bullion markets. So Singapore, just, I'm not sure if people are familiar with, but Singapore just pushed into precious metals infrastructure, and
Mhm.
Hong Kong is positioning itself as China's preferred international gold gateway. Now, Singapore is important because now you have your battle. Singapore, even though they're friendly with China, does business in a Western fashion. And so, not entirely Western fashion, but they're partnering with, I see the face you're making, but put it
No,
this
no,
way.
no, no. The face I'm making is that I see the hidden hand of London behind all of this. That's what I'm getting. Hong
Right.
Kong.
Okay, good. I thought we were gonna come to blows on that.
Oh
Well,
no, no, no! This is all about what a shock. London is trying to figure out
yeah.
how they can pull a vig off of
Okay,
everything.
so you're gonna love what I have to say. All right, so
Right, great.
JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank went into Singapore and they cut a deal with Singapore to be their market makers and to support their infrastructure there.
Right,
Right?
right.
And LBMA is Deutsche Bank and and the JP Morgan bank. So basically, the LBMA, which is twisting in the wind for the last 6 months, is partnering up with Singapore because that's where the demand is, and they're trying to set up a competing platform for what's happening in Hong Kong. So the battle now is between Chinese banks that are going to be supporting the RMB using gold in Hong Kong and Western banks supporting the dollar using gold in Singapore. And so you're going to have a competition, and eventually you're going to see more people using the RMB. And JP Morgan, American that they are, they're capitalists. So if enough people want to have their gold priced in yuan, then JP Morgan is going to start trading it that way.
That's okay as long as they're not trading in British pounds. No one really cares.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean,
sorry, I gotta throw that in there. No, and it's very important because in the past, that's how London maintained its networks for all these years, which was, remember, I keep going back to this one data point over and over and over again, that the British pound settles 30% of the world's forex. It's the liquidity token of modern finance. And all of these things that we're talking about is that we're moving the world away from that.
Right. Ripple and things like that. Right.
And so at some point, you have to ask yourself the question that, when does the British pound, which has no other purpose than as a liquidity token, because the British economy is crap.
Right.
Like the Bank of England has no collateral that doesn't have a UST QSIP behind it. Like at certain point, QSIP number behind it. At some point, you have to ask, the world has to ask itself the question: why in the fuck do I give a shit about British pounds?
Right.
And if you take away all of the infrastructure that supports the pound, the insurance contracts, the reinsurance, and all of that crap, which Trump is clearly trying to take that business away from them.
Right.
That's the real threat.
So England, Great Britain, I should say, or the City of London, to use your phrase.
Very important. City of London is not the rest of the UK.
No, and now I'm careful to make sure I say that. I understand now. They're trying to remain relevant.
Yes.
And if the demand for gold went east, and the demand for silver went east, and the vaults went east, and the business went east, well, then they've got to go there too. And they're piggybacking on JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank. And they do they have a historical relationship with Singapore still?
Who? England or the
city?
Why? How about I ask a different question for you? Why is Singapore not part of Malaysia?
Because England carved it
because
out?
The British needed an outpost, needed a financial and military outpost at the end of the Straits of Malacca to control the choke point that is the geographic choke point that is the Straits of Malacca.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Singapore was created just like Kuwait was created and all those other,
just like Hong Kong was created, just like the Caymans were created, just like.
So
yes.
carve-outs for British naval
superiority. Well, again, in the modern day, it would be for the United States Seventh Fleet to do their work for them.
Right. Okay, so
and Trump is like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right. So that's what's going on in China. China is making a major step towards, and it's going to happen. So when it happens, gold's going to be HQLA. Gold's going to be, just to put a
high quality liquid asset,
high quality liquid asset, which is a very benign term, but what it really means is it can be repoed, and once gold can be repoed. Well, let's put it this way. Hong Kong unveiled a sweeping expansion of its precious metals infrastructure with offshore yuan incentives. They launched a centralized gold clearing system. They expanded vaulting capacity, and they introduced Delivery Connect. That's that corridor between the Shanghai Exchange and the Hong Kong Exchange. And the strengthening RMB liquidity as Beijing deepens the integration of gold markets. I'm reading off of my paragraph here.
No, you're good.
The integration of gold markets with its long-term currency internationalization strategy. These are things that you and I have been talking about for the past 2 years, and they're coming to fruition now. And now people are just figuring it out. So that's what's going on in China.
And what's really important about all of this is that this goes back to a conversation I had with Dexter White ages ago when we were talking about the geopolitical chessboard. And he said the power move for China is not to take Taiwan militarily; it's to take Hong Kong. And this is exact. And what we weren't talking about was we weren't talking about this story. We were talking about no, just like move in and says, Hong Kong's ours now. I dare you to stop us, Britain.
Right.
And they just did, is the point. I think what I'm getting at here is that this is a means by which China is quote unquote taking Hong Kong, because Taiwan is going to come. Taiwan is happening on its own. The Taiwanese are okay. The Taiwanese want to reunify with China. Trump is like, I'll make hot, dry Taiwan down in Arizona, and we'll build more chips in the United States than they build in Taiwan now. So all of that's coming to an end anyway. Taiwan is this, again, keep thinking about the world from a perspective of choke points and where someone could put a toll booth. So this is why, again, we go back to Iran, why Trump saying over and over and over again, and Marco Rubio and everybody else saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
What was the turning point in the war from an international relations perspective, not from any other perspective, but from an international relations perspective? Yeah.
Can I just want to interrupt before we go into Iran. I have a genuine question about this. What's the U.S. pushback on Hong Kong? Can we remove some special status that Hong Kong has?
I don't think we care. Again,
Okay.
I think this is part of the whole. We're gonna break the world up into bits and pieces. China, J.P. Morgan being in Singapore is important. I read that as a pro-American move, and that means that we have I think you and I talked about this the last time you were on.
We did,
which is that we have to have a major American bank that has high trust with the American government and financial system here in the United States in order to be able to move money around the world. But we're still going to break up into regional blocks, and everybody's going to have their areas of mutual interest and defense, right? And there's going to be certain places around the world which will be used as our choke, for lack of just connections.
So we're not going to stop it.
No, I don't think so. I don't think why should we? Because
I don't know. No, I don't know. I'm very naive.
Yeah, no, I would say no. I mean, there's many reasons to distrust the Chinese on a variety of other issues, and those things will still have to be worked out because the Chinese are going to be very, very opportunistic if Trump were to falter in his bid to free us from the codependent and narcissistic abusive relationship with old Europe. If he fails, then China has to have a whole bunch of hedges in place. Right. I mean, I wouldn't, this is why I don't even really, I hate to say it, I don't even really begrudge the Chinese like owning California politics. Like, I get it. I understand why. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm not saying that I like it. I'm just saying if I look at things from China's perspective, I'm like, yeah, well, what if, the United States does fall and collapse into, and why wouldn't we help make that happen if it furthers our interest, because we have to now fight against the old freaking, fuckers in Europe that, gave us the opium wars and everything else. So,
So Iran.
So the reason why Iran is important here is that, and again, what I was saying earlier is like, what was the international relations turning point in the war? It wasn't the MOU. It wasn't, Trump declaring a ceasefire. It was Iran or the IRGC or somebody in Tehran lobbing a missile that could reach Diego Garcia. Why that was so important is the following. It proved that they had the missile technology to throw a ballistic missile 3,000 kilometers or more from Tehran. And that was a small nuclear warhead, that covers everything from the English Channel to Gibraltar to Malacca and everything else. And that's the problem, because that then turns them into North Korea on the Persian Gulf.
Right.
And that then gives them leverage over everyone. And that's where London really wanted to decamp to, not to Tehran, but to Abu Dhabi, which they had already built all that up, or Dubai. They had already built all that up,
Okay.
right? You know, how many times have I've talked about this, and I've had people like come out of the woodwork and they go, Tom, I was just in Abu Dhabi, I was just in Dubai the other day. It's all Brits. And
Is it
they're all,
really?
and you know, it's all of that. And you're like, what are you kidding? Of course, obviously. They were looking to decamp city of London as a thing, as a symbol, or
Right, right, right,
as a metaphor. You know, has moved from Venice to Amsterdam to London, you know, and now they wanted to move it to Dubai,
right.
and wanted to hold the world in thrall to our energy dependence on oil, which is why they told us we had to go in for all these renewables, which they knew were, and which gives free energy and efficient,
Right.
non-spontaneous, as it were. If you're thinking about it like a chemist, like I do, energetically, all of these things are dumb, right? Like, how do we do the war on transportation? It's again, diesel engines are one of the most efficient uses of hydrocarbons there are. There's absolutely no fucking reason we shouldn't all be driving diesel cars. They
Right.
know that, which is why they then added Rube Goldberg devices onto them to make them inefficient, to
Right.
destroy their thermal efficiency, and at the same time restrict the supply of diesel, making it and then try and move us all into EVs, which they can then control us with. Like, this is their mindset. I wrote for last month's newsletter um, an entire article about Davos going all in to stop the world from using oil or controlling oil when we all want to move to nuclear of some form or another. And it's just
Right.
like, it's the dumbest thing imaginable. You're fighting over the wrong thing when technology has already passed you by.
Right.
And so, from a monetary perspective, treasuries are last year's collateral, or last century's collateral, and we're moving back to gold in order to like remind everybody that of what we actually care about, which is to build things, and we need real collateral without leverage or with minimal leverage.
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I would
I
just
mean,
say that. I
okay,
would just say that. I mean, we should turn to I mean, staying with Iran.
mm-hmm.
Uh, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of what looks like scatterbrain stuff coming out of Trump's mouth. And but I mean, you know where I am in that camp.
I
But
no, actually, I really don't, because I don't really. I mean, you never show up on my Twitter feed. Like, I want
I
everybody to
noticed
realize
that.
that.
I
Yeah,
noticed that.
well, there's a reason for that.
I don't show up on your Twitter. You don't show up on mine. It
And there's a
stopped.
reason. There's a reason for that.
It stopped about 6 months ago.
Yeah,
It's
there's a
kind of
reason.
weird.
It's a, oh yeah, yeah, you think?
Do you really think that? Come on. Am I
Oh,
that naive?
I look. There's been a very, very obvious operation running to hive us all off into different and smaller groups in order to keep us all from talking to each other.
Right, right.
And
That's that thread that you pointed out to me
mhm,
that I read.
yeah,
I read that. I
yeah,
read that thread and I went, you know what? This is another one of those, well, Tom's crazy. And then 6 months later, I'm like, Tom's right, and I'm like, all right, so I don't think I'm that important. But then again, maybe they
well,
just don't
yeah,
want
no.
anyone
Well,
to
again,
talk to
this is
them.
the thing. We all don't want to believe we're important, but then when you see the operations happening, you're like, and again, I watch this stuff from a variety of different perspectives, and I do a lot of podcasts. I try to collaborate with as many people as possible, and I read a lot of commentary. And I
Right.
also go out of my way sometimes, and sometimes I go overboard. My Twitter feed is a dumpster fire. Sometimes I'm not going to not cop to that. The extra white
No, your Twitter
will be
feeder
happy
is
will be happy to hear that I have internalized this. But sometimes I do it on purpose to see what reaction I can poke from people in
right.
order to see what operation is currently running. Like, we all do this on purpose, and maybe it's just me being friggin' paranoid. But dude, when it happens over and over and over again, I'm like, okay, there's got to be something else going on here. When it was funny, I saw something on Twitter the other day that made me stop, and I went. Somebody said, like, where are all the pro-American accounts? It's like a dime a dozen if you're a collapsitarian or you hate Trump or this or that. They're
Right.
everywhere. but there's only like a handful of, and he didn't even like, he mentioned me. And then, and I'm like, there's at least 4 or 5 others, but you can't see them either, can you? Like, you know what I mean? And the algorithm has gotten more and more tuned to, if you don't actively interact with something, you're not going to see it.
Right.
And
No, no, right. That I totally see that. It
mhm,
only feeds me, it's my grandmother who knows that I like chicken cutlets, and I come over her house and it's chicken cutlets every fucking time for three
right,
years when I say to her, Grandma, could we have steak once in a while? And
right.
and that's my feed has become chicken cutlets.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I never
Yeah.
see the opposite of chicken cutlets. So
Right.
yeah,
No, it's funny. No, it's
that
funny. I was just thinking about this the other day. Like every Thanksgiving, it was important for my Aunt Anne. I was chatting with somebody, my Aunt Anne who lived on Staten Island. Whenever we were going to show up, my family were going to show up at my Uncle Jimmy's house. She always went to the local Italian bakery right around the corner to make sure
right,
that there were crumb buns, because she knew I loved them.
right.
And like I'm thinking about this the same thing. Now they also, yes, it's the same thing. Like,
Right.
my grandmother always made, they only saw me 4 or 5 times a year. So of course, and she always made the things that she knew I liked, and
My
all the rest.
feed has become the manipulative grandmother who won't let me eat anything except what she thinks that I like. And
Exactly.
so my feed thinks that I like only this. And
Right.
so, and,
And
and
it's
so
been
I
over
have to,
time.
you have to follow like some fucking commie, to get anything like
And you have
off
to
center.
actively search people out that you are interested in. And I find that it's really funny, because what I wound up with was a really weird moment where I'm I then get fed some of my people, my friends, the people that I thought, like, and they're like off in la la land about what Trump is doing. I'm like, um, uh, really, you've not heard a word that's come out of my mouth over the last 4 months? Like, you know,
They surround you with people that are against you. That's what it seems like you are.
right?
I
Or
mean,
you're only surrounded by the people who agree with you, and
but
that's also
right,
very
right.
important.
But I guess what I'm asking you is, are our experiences different? Meaning, I am only surrounded by people that agree with me or uh, talk about silver, my chicken cutlets, right? You are pro-American. I'm not saying that I'm not pro-American, but you are more over the top pro-American. Do you get to meet other pro-Americans, or are you only surrounded by people that are anti-American?
Oh no, I get a good mixture of both, because I also actively go out of my way to find people who aren't and then make fun of them. And that's what I mean by sometimes my Twitter feed is a dumpster fire, and it also does want to feed. I mean, in my case, it's really obvious that there's everybody. When I speak, what I wind up getting is I get a whole bunch of bots and marginal accounts come in and run operations in relation to that, and I have to like go through and block people left and right. I had to do this for weeks. Like the
Right,
first 8 weeks of the Iran conflict was me just reading the comments and blocking people, like, left and right. Like, I'm
right,
not kidding. 10, 12, 14 people a day. Right. And just in order but by doing that, of course, you're no longer getting any bots, which is great. But then, you're also just getting a curated feed of the people who either agree with you or
right,
don't. And it then becomes a very dangerous game or difficult game to try and separate out the people who aren't bots from the people who are bots, so that you can then try to have a conversation with people where it's rational.
right,
And you're like,
right,
you want to have good conversations with the honest people, but it's hard to do that when everybody's app reacting in real time, you know, like a bunch of crazy Italians.
right,
And we should
exactly.
be not, we should not be doing that. We should be trying to like bring the temperature down. And we're all overscheduled, we're all overstressed. Like it's all, and so the commentary becomes, a whole bunch of, if not A, then B stuff. If Trump is not, winning, that he must be losing, because there can't be any gradient here, because we've defined winning and losing in false ways,
Right,
right?
right.
So I think maybe I mean, from everything you're seeing, like I think, you've seen, and I think I want to bring this up to you now, is, do you see benefits, even if you disagree with the policy of what he's done so far, over Iran? And if so, what
Oh,
are they? Because that would be
oh yeah,
interesting to hear your perspective on that. Because I know what I think. Like,
yeah.
right,
I I have I have strong opinions about Donald Trump versus Donald Trump's policies.
Hmm.
First of all, how do I start? I think Donald Trump is the right man for the job. I think we tried to do it Obama's way. What is it? I'll have to explain what that is. But we tried to do it Obama's way. We tried to do it Bush's way. We tried to do it Biden's way. And those ways don't work. So now we're doing it Trump's way, and it is happening finally. Now, what is it? It is the United States. Now, I'm introducing a new concept here. It's not my concept, it's Stephen Cochrana's concept, but I happen to agree with it. It is we are renegotiating with the world on defense spending. So, for example, using your old Europe concept, the United States is don't quote me on the exact numbers here, but United States is 17% of the world's I'm sorry, 12% of the world's population,
Hmm.
and it's 50% of the 25% of the world's GDP.
Hmm.
All right. Europe is 17% of the world's population and over 50% of the world's welfare state. So when you look at those two things, now going back to the United States is, again, 12% of the world's population, maybe it's 15, I don't know. And it's over 50% of the world's defense spending. So when you compare Europe to us, you say Europe has more people than us. They spend nothing on military, and we're backing them in Europe with NATO. What are they doing with that money? Because we're giving them $350 billion a year in defense spending. That's what NATO is. They're creating the world's greatest welfare state. Now, that's unsustainable for Europe to have. Now, we knew this back in Obama's time. I mean, I'm only learning this now, but we knew this back in Obama's time, but Obama just didn't. Obama tried to do his fancy, academic lawyer way to do it, and it didn't work. He ended up kissing ass to Europe. But back to the reality of it. So when you have the United States with less population than Europe, triple the defense spending of all of Europe, and a fraction of what Europe spends. I just want to I want to say this again. The US has 12% of the world's population, roughly, and has 50% of the world's defense spending.
Hmm.
Europe has 17% of the world's population and 50% of the world's welfare spending.
Hmm.
They're spending the money they're not spending on defense, on welfare. We have been subsidizing their defense. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad deal. That was a good deal. We offered them that deal. They took that deal years ago, but it's no longer a good deal for us. We're spread too thin. The demands on U.S. power are infinite, but the demands on U.S. power are but the actual limits of U.S. power are finite. They want us everywhere. And what's happening is we're going to rot from the inside like the Soviet Union did because we're spreading ourselves too thin. So we're renegotiating. Biden tried to do it in his own stupid way. Trump's trying to do it, but Trump's getting it done now. It's happening now. He's outright saying it. We're not going to spend as much money on NATO. This is the same thing. We're not spending money on NATO. We're not spending much money on the Middle East. We're on our way out. We're just going to secure it the way we can. Everyone's getting their severance pays as we back out. We're pulling the cop off of all the street corners. And so even though I tactically sometimes think that Trump is out of his fucking mind, and I think that sometimes I think that Trump is speaking intentionally out of his mind. Sometimes I think he's just out of his mind. I know that whoever is influencing him is influencing him to do the right job in the right situation. And he has moved the needle. And that needle is we need to renegotiate with the world on how much money is spent on things. Look, it's just not sustainable. Europe can't keep having 50% of the world's welfare state while it only has 17% of the world's population. We can't keep spending 50% of the world's money. And by the way, we're better suited to spend more money on that. But now you got Europe. Europe has got, you could see the problems happening right now. Europe is in denial. Europe has to spend from 1% of its GDP on defense Now it's going up to maybe as high as 6%, depending on who you talk to. And that money's got to come from somewhere. And it's coming from their welfare state. So meanwhile, we're pulling all of our military resources home, and we're going to defend home. So while I disagree, while I dislike Trump's um, uh, modus of operandi in terms of how he projects himself publicly, I don't care because, yeah, I would love to have someone who was smooth and a better politician about it that way, but we don't need that. We need a Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was viewed as a loose cannon. So Trump is being his own type of Ronald Reagan. Trump is being a little bit of a loose cannon. So when he says in the same conversation, I like Iran, I want to bomb Iran, I go, Jesus Christ, what the fuck are you doing, right? But I know what he's doing. He's keeping things unstable because the MOU, as you pointed out, is not really anything, and he needs to do that. The Strait of Hormuz, you need to keep, look, we stabilize the rest of the world. As we pull out of the rest of the world, we're going to stir up some shit to make them have to deal with each other. How's it going to look when we're not there anymore? And all of a sudden, China's got to look at Iran without the U.S. being the policeman there. So I am fully in Trump's corner of what he's doing. I just don't pretend to understand. I know how he's doing it.
That's fair. That's a great answer, actually. I wish more people had that answer, because, or at least some version of that answer. What they don't have is and like, you understand, like, like, and even if you don't understand why he does what he does, right? The way he does it. Because again, I like to have a better conversation about his tactical wins, his tactical losses, the way he's doing. I'd rather have that than whether or not he's, a fucking idiot for not actually, which is clearly not the case, right? He's clearly operating at an international level and an international relations level differently. So I'm going to throw a couple of things at you to understand. One of the other side, everything you just said, and then we're going to add some more color on top of that, because everything you said is fundamentally correct, right? But here's the let's take it one step further. I asked earlier, why would China act, or I pointed out earlier, why would China act the way they are, vis-a-vis California politics and America and everything else? What if Trump doesn't win, right? They are asking themselves that question in Beijing. Oh, yeah. Putin asks that question in the Kremlin all the time. He's like, I'd like to believe that he can pull all this off. I want to believe he can pull all this off. That's why when he went to Beijing, he got the red carpets. Why Putin just invited him to come to Moscow, and after the, and all of that stuff. They want what he's offering, but they are also not stupid in understanding that he's got the rest of the infrastructure in the United States politically against him. Europe is against him politically, the same way they're against Russia and China politically. So he's got to deal with all that, and he's got to win. And if he doesn't win the midterms, if he doesn't win this, if he doesn't win that, the whole thing starts to collapse. In the United States, then, well, there's going to be a very ugly constitutional crisis, if not actual, honest to God, replay of 1858 through 1865 here in the United States, which is clearly what our enemies are playing against. And I don't consider Russia and China, that part of that as anything other than opportunistic hangers on, right?
In that, they're not pure enemies; they're frenemies.
No. They're
adversaries, not enemies.
Well, what they are is saying to themselves, again, the way I look at it, and you can disagree with me if you like, and I'm happy to have that conversation. But the way I see them in this framework is their actions so far over Iran, over all of these things, have been pretty self-consistent with this international relations framework, which is the following: that if Trump loses and the United States starts to collapse, they have to be there to be able to get as much out of that collapse as they can. Okay.
Right.
In order to fortify themselves against they who are going to take control of the U.S. military, the U.S. financial system, and all this other stuff. And it goes back to being hyper aggressive against them. Okay. Because it's going to, at that point, go into overdrive, because there's no longer going to be any internal opposition from the United States in this model. So if Trump wins, everything takes care of itself. And with the framework for how the world is going to work, much of what we talked about in the first half of this podcast will start to play itself out, the world will kind of balkanize into regional trade blocks, and
Right.
gold will move back and forth, and dollars will move back and forth, and renminbi will be
Balkanize is a good word. I just want to point
right.
that out. Balkanize is a good word.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that will happen. Well, but we'll have that what I've been calling ARC as a framework, but not as any kind of alliance, just as individual powers with their individual spheres of influence. And Europe gets walled off into a John Carpenter movie, which they're practically doing on their own anyway. So might as well just let them keep doing it, right? Um, but if he loses, that's bad. Now, until Trump definitively wins. So what is he doing? So why is this important back to the Middle East? Well, let's do the thing. If Trump loses, Trump has to also pursue policy in case he loses.
Well,
So
loses what? You're referring to the midterms, or you're
I'm
referring
talking
to?
about just the political fight for the
Okay,
future
okay.
of the United
The big
States.
picture fight.
Meaning,
Okay.
meaning, what happens if we get wound up with President Kamala Harris or President AOC in 2029?
Right, right.
Okay.
Oh yeah, okay,
So
right.
now start thinking about all those bases, all that military infrastructure, all that military hardware, and everything else. And think about it in the hands of AOC, not in the hands of Donald Trump.
Right, right.
Those bases, that infrastructure, that all needs to be destroyed. When the United States decides it wants to pull out of the region, it can't leave any assets behind. Why do you think Trump is so angry with Biden for leaving all of our stuff over there?
Right,
Because then
right.
that stuff could be used to destabilize the entire continent.
Right, that's the point. The plan back then was we're going to start pulling out of the Middle East, and Biden executed it in a horrible fashion. So
He
Trump's
executed
doing it
it
his own way.
exactly the way Obama and the city of London wanted him to, which was to leave $20 billion worth of material to keep fucking up the goddamn Central Asian. They did it on purpose. It wasn't incompetence. This is I'm not angry with you. I'm getting.
I don't think you
It's
are.
so very obvious. Like they did this shit on purpose. I mean, Obama was the original Manchurian candidate, but he worked for City of London the entire fucking time. Everything he did was to destroy the United States militarily, politically, culturally, economically. Like the more I look at, I review Obama's record, the more I'm like, oh my God, could you not work for these fucking people anymore? Again, I should have seen this years ago, and I didn't see it. And mea culpa that I only
No, I don't think any of us did. You probably saw it more than most.
I can tell you one guy who did, and he was yelling at me the entire time going back to 2008, which is my good friend and partner Dexter White. He'd been screaming about me about Obama for years, and I heard some of it, but I didn't hear all of it. So I'm giving him props here because it's so much of this stuff is coming to fruition. Is becoming obvious now. But what we're doing now is we're beginning to really trace all of the little things. Like again, I can take the war on transportation I talked about earlier. You could do a 5-hour podcast or write 3 books on how Obama and Davos destroyed American transportation to destroy the middle class. I could write 3 books on Fannie and Freddie, the stealing of Fannie and Freddie in the 2008 global financial crisis. There's so much. It's so fucking obvious at this point. So from Trump's perspective, the on again, off again, ceasefire, no ceasefire, MOU, not MOU, all of that is him. And I agree with my friend Joaquin Flores about this. And you and I haven't talked about this, but I'm going to bring you up to date. Joaquin Flores and I have been both, and Joaquin's been much more eloquent about this than I have been, but for a lot longer, which is he's calling the whole war kind of kayfabe. Like after the first 10 or 15 days were the bombing, and we stopped bombing after the first 10 days because there was nothing else to really bomb that mattered.
Right.
Trump has been in negotiation with the emergent civilian political power in Tehran. But unfortunately, they already agreed what needs to be done, which is we need to eventually, we need to keep destroying the remnants of the IRGC, of the mullahocracy, or whatever you want to call it, and out all of their relationships with all of the old powers of Europe. And the same thing in Israel, by the way. Israel's just as much of a problem. So all of these things have to be brought out into the open. We have to cross everybody's red line slowly pop up another version of pop another guy up that's going to say, no, you can't cross that red line. And then they agree to something that somebody disagrees with. They create a red line. They cross the red line. A tanker gets blown up. An Apache gets knocked out of the air, whatever. And that restarts the hostilities, giving Trump another opportunity to bomb yet another group of targets. And then we do it again and again and again. At every point, telling everybody, do you want to choose death or do you want to choose life?
Right.
You keep choosing death, okay, more death. We can have death. You choose death, we'll give you death. It's your choice. Or you can or you can back down, let these people take power in Tehran and have everybody win.
Right.
And start moving the money. And we've tried this. So what we've done, so where we are today, literally today, is the day when everybody got the memo. Trump has tried to negotiate with peace. He gave Iran in the MOU far more than they deserve.
Right.
And they still threw it back in his face.
No, he gave them everything except the nuclear, and they're throwing it back in his face. Yeah. I was upset with Trump for giving
they're no
everything
longer
away.
the victims. The point is now they're no longer the victims. Trump looks like the magnanimous one. From an international relationship, you will never get that out of the pro-Iranian chorus or the pro-Russian chorus or any of those people in that part of the commentary. You never get that. You'll never get it out of the libertarians who are angry that you can bomb people to peace. You'll never get that out of them because it runs contra to their entire psychological makeup. Okay, but unfortunately, there are different people in the world than pacifists who are willing to go to the gas chamber on standing on their principles. Sorry, I'm not one of those guys. I never have been. I'm a little too Sicilian for that.
Right, exactly. I understand. I empathize. That's funny.
No, seriously. So that's what I've been trying to. That's where I am on this, and I think all of what we've talked about. I know I've kind of dominated here, and I want to hand the microphone.
No. This is what we're here for. We're here for this. Yeah.
I mean, I want to hand the microphone back to you because I do want you to tie a bow around this and to see what I'm getting at, or not just see what I'm getting at, but to come to conclusions and then see it even within the context of the book you just wrote, which is literally fits beautifully into so much of what we've been discussing, honestly. And I didn't know you had written a book until you told me before we sat down to hit record. And I'm like,
we haven't talked in a while. Exactly. We haven't talked in a while. So this is really good to catch up. I don't have any bow to tie around that, except that I agree that look, I mean, I think I already said what I wanted to say about Trump. I think that he's the method to his madness is it is bearing fruit. We are moving the negotiation in the big picture to renegotiating how defense spending is spent in the world. We're protecting ourselves, Western Hemisphere, Monroe Doctrine or Donroe Doctrine, and it's the micro tactics that I don't understand, and so I just don't pretend to understand it, but I tend to watch and I just say, okay, he's going to keep bombing, so the Strait of Hormuz is not going to be open. We really don't care about that. What's you had your phrase you're using?
We're rewiring.
What?
We're rewiring global trade.
But there's
balkanize. Balkanize?
No, not balkanize. Rewiring the global trade bottlenecks. Where there are bottlenecks.
Choke points. We're trying to get rid of all
choke points. Choke points. That's the word. Choke points. So, the Strait of Hormuz is a choke point. We bombed the choke point. We destabilized the choke point. We're not there to fix Hormuz anymore. We're there to reroute everything away from Hormuz, and that's what we're doing. So I look at that and I say, all right, if he's going to keep bombing it, I know why we're doing it. We're going to get the pipeline built for the Saudis. We're going to have more oil coming out of the U.S. or even Venezuela soon. Mm-hmm. And I agree. I agree with. How about this? I agree with the results of everything he's done so far, and I'm not even a fan. That's a
perfectly reasonable position to be. You don't have to like the guy, but if you can understand the outcomes and you can be okay with it, well, fine. Like I don't have to. I don't. It's funny. I find Trump both hilarious and frustrating, and I find him all of these things all at the same time.
Right, right, right.
Um, and so here's another one that people need to, and they're going to hate this, but you rewire away from Hormuz and you create pipelines. You know where
Right.
those pipelines are going to terminate, right? Haifa,
Turkey?
Haifa,
I don't know. I don't understand.
Israel, the port at Haifa. And
Oh,
Israel's going to get benefit out of this, but that's how you stabilize Israel as well. You
right.
stitch all these people together. And where is that oil going to go from Haifa? Where's the most logical place it's going to go?
Europe?
Southern Europe, right? And why are the Northern Europeans all butthurt about this? The Anglo-Dutch, the French, the Germans, the
Right,
British, Dutch. Why are they all butthurt about this? Because they've been trying to starve Southern Europe in order to consolidate power in Brussels because they hate their Southern European counterparts. They hate
right,
all.
right.
This is old. This is just old European in many ways. A lot of this, and so this is part of the problem. And I mean, I could sit here. We could talk for another hour about why Italy, why Greece, why Turkey, why all of this stuff. And it's all part and parcel to the same age old um, hatreds within Europe. And it's why the EU was sold to us as a path to European peace, and it's completely the exact opposite of that.
No, it's a welfare state that. Oh, something I wanted to add
Mm.
about the whole European defense mechanism. Think about. I mean, this is like direct from the playbook on our defense. If we're NATO and they're NATO, and there's a war in Iran, and NATO won't go to Iran, but the U.S. will. Trump's right. Why would we spend money on Europe's defense if they won't join us in the defense of the nations that are going to threaten Europe? I mean, it's they're not going to they don't have our backs if we go into a world war.
Right.
So that's really what it is. And so I have little use for them.
Yeah, well, and by the way, he made the same argument about Russia in his first term. He just substitute Russia for Iran from term to term, and he's the exact same arguments when he went to NATO. And there's that great picture of Angela Merkel standing over him with him all defiant and her like,
I
haranguing
remember
him.
that. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
remember that picture? Well, that was, they used that picture, of course, to great effect to try and, but it was the same argument he was making back then about Russia.
Yeah.
It was the exact same argument. So, all right, man. Is there anything else we need to cover here other than the fact that you're now a book writer and stuff, which is awesome and cool and wonderful. So
I'm an
give us
I'm an
everybody give everybody the title of your book again. Let's do the thing on the way out the door. Let's
I,
sell some copies for Vince, folks. Come on.
sure. Thank you. As Good as Gold, The Return of Real Money. And it's available on Barnes and Noble, but Kindle is where you probably want to get it because it's easier to get there. And it was a bestseller for 3 weeks,
Nice.
but it got bumped off by some free book on Kindle. So I'll give you the link to put in there, and
Please do, and I will put it in the
it,
show notes.
it's a 3 hour read. You'll get a lot out of it, and it'll also make you more confident in the path forward with gold in the future of money.
Mhm.
Thank you, Tom.
which is important ultimately because the way I want to stress this is a conversation that Vince and I have been having for close to 3 years, and I think at least 3 years on this podcast is and I would absolutely, if you're interested, review every one of Vince's appearances on this podcast because they're all part of the big story. Not just to give me the 20 cents and Spreaker ads, but
Right.
it's important here that you see how he and I have worked through this and how he's done this, because when you begin to understand plumbing in this way, you begin to understand what it is we're really trying to build. And I think it all ties back into the international relations things we've talked about in the second half of the podcast, as well as how Trump is going to hopefully pull off some of the things he's trying to pull off to better not just America, but everybody else will benefit from this by getting rid of this hyper financialized system that we have that only benefits, frankly, what I call now, I don't even call them Davos anymore. They're just these fucking people. And, just TFP, these fucking people. So with that said, BBL Goldfix on Substack, Soren the K on Twitter. Correct, Vince?
Correct. Thank you, Tom.
TFL 1728 and Patreon/Gold Goats and Guns. You guys know the drill. You guys be well. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.